If you opened up Notion's database right now and you looked inside, you would find something that almost no software architecture textbook would tell you to build. Because everything in Notion, every paragraph you've ever typed, every checkbox, every image, every database row, every page, every workspace, everything lives in basically one table, one unified data structure, and it's called a block. And the thing is, this is not a hack. This is not technical debt. This is a deliberate, deeply thought out choice that made Notion Notion. And without that one decision, Notion would not exist as a product that you now know. And with this decision, they've scaled to over 200 billion blocks of content across millions of workspaces. So in today's video, we're going to walk through the data model behind Notion. And honestly, the story is way more interesting than what you would imagine. Because just that single decision, that one architectural choice, cascades into every other engineering problem that Notion has had to solve, like their permission system, or their sharding strategy, or the way they handle offline data, or the way they built AI features. And all of it traces back to this one decision that they made in 2016. The most important lesson that you'll take away from this video is that data model decisions are the most consequential decisions that you will ever make. Because you can always swap the database that you pick. You can always refactor the framework that you pick, but the shape of your data, especially once you've got 200 billion rows organized around it, that's basically permanent. You can't go back. Now, the way that most software is built is that you've got documents, which are kind of an object. You've got database rows, which are kind of another object. You've got wiki pages, which are also another kind of object. And each of these has its own schema, its own storage layer, its own API. They're basically separate things that you stitch together at the UI layer. But Notion said, no, we don't want any of that. And we're going to have just one type of object, and we're going to call it a block. And then everything, like every paragraph, image, every checkbox, every database row, every page, every embedded widget is going to all become a block. It's going to be the same structure. It's going to have the same storage. It's all going to be having the same API. And the only thing that changes is the type field on the block, which tells the UI how to render it. So you just have one unified data model, and the structure of a block is actually pretty simple. You've got an ID, which is a UUID. You've got a type, which says what kind of block this is. You've got properties, which is a JSON blob. You've got content, which is an array of pointers to child blocks. You've got a parent pointer, and you've got some metadata, like when was it created, when was it edited, who owns it, and so on. And that's basically the whole schema, and you can look at it. It's very simple. And yet every single thing that you can do in Notion is just built on top of this. So now the question becomes, why is this so powerful? And this is what we'll discuss about right now, like what the block model unlocks, because the upside to this is genuinely huge. And there are three things really. The first is composability. So when everything is a block, you can put anything inside anything, and you can nest a database inside a page. You can put a to-do list inside a toggle, inside a table cell, inside a database row. So there's no special code for can a database be inside a page, because every parent-child relationship is the same operation. So the page just has the database's block ID in its content array, and that's it. The composability is free because the data model does not distinguish. The second thing is that you have one API surface for everything. Everything is a block, and you need only one set of operations. So you can create a block, update a block, delete a block, move a block. Those 4 operations handle every editing action a user can take inside Notion. So if you want to bold a word, that's an update to a block's properties. If you want to ident a list item, that's a move. If you want to indent a list item, that's a move. Reparent this block. If you want to delete a page, you can just delete the block. Now compare that to a system where every type of object has its own create, update, delete API, and you've got an explosion of endpoints. Notion has only 4. And the third one, which is a subtle one, is that there's infinite extensibility without schema migrations. So when Notion wants to ship a new block type, say a code block or a math equation or an AI summary block, they don't need to migrate any database tables. They don't need to add a new column. They just register a new type value and a new renderer in the front end. The backend does not change. The schema does not change. And the new block type is just another block. And new features ship without database work. And that's huge. So we looked at 3 things: composability and single API, schema-free extensibility. Well, these are the reasons Notion can build features that competitors can't, or features that competitors could build, but only by tearing apart their entire data model first. So Notion's competition keeps shipping features that look like Notion's features, but they're much slower because they're fighting against their own data models the whole way. Now, before we go any further, I want to tell you about the Algoroq cohort, which I personally teach to a group of 10 to 15 senior engineers. It's a 12 weeks program, and it's geared towards advanced system design and learning post-AI architectural skills. Now, this is for people who already know the basics of system design and architecture and want to build the next generation of production-level software. The next cohort is going to start in July. So I want you to go to the website algoroq.io, which is algoroq.io, and actually go through the list of topics that we're going to cover. If you like these topics, I want you to fill up the form that opens up when you hit the enroll button. Once you've done that, I'll check to see if you're a great fit, and then I'll set up a call with you. It's about $2,400 for the live cohort, which I teach personally for 12 weeks. But if you just wanted access to the pre-recorded videos, that'll be about $800. The kind of people who attend this cohort have experience between 7 years all the way to 26 years of experience. And this is a perfect fit for SREs, platform engineers, principal engineers, staff engineers, senior engineers, enterprise and solution architect. If you're a junior engineer starting your career, this is not right for you, so please don't fill up the form. Okay, so let's talk about what the block model costs you. Because when everything is a block and blocks can be nested arbitrarily inside other blocks, you've effectively built a tree, or really a forest, since each workspace is its own tree. And the point is, your data is no longer relational, it's hierarchical, it's a graph. And graphs are great for some things, but they are terrible for one specific thing that turns out to matter enormously, which is permissions. So think about it this way. In a normal application, you have a documents table, and each document has an owner ID column. And when someone wants to view a document, you do a single index lookup. Is this user the owner? That's just one query, and it's constant time. In Notion, permissions don't work like that. Permissions are inherited. If I share a top level page with you, you get access to that page and every block nested inside it. And then every subpage nested inside that, and every block inside those subpages, recursively all the way down. So when you click on a single block in Notion to view it, the backend can't just check, do you have access to this block? It has to walk up the ancestor tree all the way to the root workspace, checking at each level whether anyone set an explicit permission that applies to you. And if a page along the way has an explicit grant or denial, that wins. And if not, you keep walking up. Eventually, you hit the workspace root and you get a final answer. For one block, this is fine because that's maybe 4 or 5 database lookups, but Notion doesn't load one block at a time. When you open a page, the backend has to figure out which blocks you can see, and that means it has to check for every block on that page, and pages basically can have thousands of blocks, so it has to walk the entire ancestor tree. And this is the actual scaling problem that the block model creates. The permission computation is the most expensive thing the system does, and it's not a fixable bug. It's an inherent consequence of the data model. So block plus nested plus inherited permissions is equal to ancestor tree traversal on every request, which means basically for a lot of requests, there's a lot of ancestor tree travel. And this is one of the moments where you start seeing the real cost of an architectural decision. The block model that gave Notion incredible flexibility has also given them a permission system that's structurally expensive forever. And they've been engineering around this cost for nearly a decade now. And the way they've engineered around it is actually very clever, which we'll get to right now. And this is where Notion did something really, really smart. So pay attention here. The problem they had to solve is that they needed 2 different tree structures over the same data. On the one hand, they had the render tree, because when you open a page, the front end needs to know what to show. The page block has a content array, and that array contains the IDs of all the blocks that should appear inside the page in order. And those blocks might have their own content arrays. And the render is built by walking down from the page through this content tree. On the other hand, they had the permission tree. To check whether a user can see a block, you need to walk up from the block through its parents looking for permission grants, and that's a totally different tree walk, going upward instead of downward. So here's the thing, these 2 trees are not the same, and the reason they're not the same is quite subtle. Imagine you've got a page, and inside that page there's a block that references another block, like an inline mention of another page. The rendered tree includes that mention block in some position, but the permission tree for that mention block is not determined by where it's rendered, it's determined by where it lives, and where it was created, and who owns it structurally. So Notion built their data model with 2 pointer systems. Every block has a content array. That's the downward pointer system used for rendering. And every block also has a parent ID. That's the upward pointer used for permissions and ownership. And this might sound like over-engineering, because why not just have one tree? And the answer is because they do different things and they need to be optimized differently. The render tree gets walked top down on every page load, and the parent pointer gets walked bottom up on every permission check. By separating them, Notion can index them differently, cache them differently, and most importantly, they can change one without affecting the other. So here's the operational payoff. When you move a block from one page to another in Notion, you can either change just the content arrays, which is the rendering moves but permissions stay put, or you can change the parent ID too, which moves both of them. The product surface lets users do either, and the data model accommodates it cleanly because the 2 concerns are separated. This is what good data modeling looks like. Separate the things that are conceptually different even when they look the same. And the block is one entity, but it participates in 2 different trees. And Notion modeled those 2 trees explicitly instead of conflating them. And that's the move. All right, Notion has done this beautiful data model where everything is a block and you have 2 pointer systems and the render tree is there and the permission tree is different. And Postgres now handles all of it. But now all of a sudden Notion starts growing rapidly. And in 2021, they had about 20 billion blocks in their Postgres database, and that's a lot. But it was all still on a single Postgres setup with some basic replication. And by 2024, they had over 200 billion blocks, doubling every 6 to 12 months. And that's a wild growth rate, and it created 2 completely different scaling problems that Notion had to solve in parallel. Problem 1 was around operational databases, the system serving the live user requests. So Postgres holding 200 billion rows on a single primary does not work. It cannot fit in memory, indexes get too big to scan, and query planners start making bad decisions. And the second problem is around analytics. Now, Notion wanted to build features like search, AI, and analytics dashboards. Those features need to do massive scans all over the block data. You cannot run a scan every block in the workspace query against your production Postgres without taking down the product. Analytics workloads and live workloads need to live in different worlds. So they had to solve both at the same time. They sharded the production Postgres and they built a data lake for analytics. So there are two different responses to two different aspects of the same scale problem. So let's walk through both. Okay, so the first up is how Notion sharded Postgres. And the sharding decision is where they get to leverage one specific property of the data that not every system has. So the question is, what do you shard on? Now, if you remember the Instagram video where we talked about how Instagram scaled Postgres to 2 million users, there when Instagram sharded, they sharded by user ID. And that made single user queries fast, but cross user queries expensive. And every data model has this trade. For Notion, the equivalent question is, what natural grouping in the data should live together on the same shard? And the answer is workspaces. So now think about it from a query perspective. When you open Notion, you're in one workspace. It could be your company's workspace, and every block you load belongs to that workspace. And every permission check happens within that workspace's tree, and every search you do is scoped to that workspace. The workspace is the natural unit of access. So almost every read query in the system is naturally bounded by workspace ID. So Notion actually shards by workspace. So all blocks belonging to a given workspace live together on the same shard. And when you load a page, the backend knows your workspace ID, hashes it to a shard, and that one shard has everything it needs to serve the request. So as of 2023, Notion ran 96 Postgres instances, each holding 5 logical shards. So 480 logical shards total. And the reason for that split is the same as the one we saw in the Instagram video, which is the logical versus physical decoupling. We've covered that before. Now, the logical sharding does not change, and the physical hosts can be added or rebalanced without rewriting data. So the reason that workspaces work as a shard key so well for Notion because it matches the actual access pattern of how the product works. Almost every single query in Notion is scoped to one workspace. So you don't search across workspaces, you don't share pages across workspaces, and you don't compute analytics across workspaces from the product surface. So co-locating all the data for a workspace means the common case is one shard, one query, and that's actually really fast. And this is the principle here. Your shard key should match how your data is actually accessed. If the natural unit of access in your product is the user, then you should shard by user. If it's the workspace, then you should shard by workspace. If it's the team, then you should shard by team, and so on. Now, in case you're new on this YouTube channel, you should know that I have a Ultimate System Design for Beginners playlist, which has more than 50 videos. And I also have an Intermediate System Design playlist, which will have more than 10 videos. Apart from that, I have the Technology Architect course playlist, and I have the 7 hours of microservices breakdown video on how to handle microservices in production. It has more than 100,000 views. Now, if you watch all of this content, you'll know system design and architecture better than 99% of people on the planet. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now, workspace as shard key that we just saw is only a good idea if your data really is bounded by workspace. If you had heavy cross workspace queries like show me all the pages mentioning Bitcoin across every workspace on the platform, then workspace sharding would be really bad for you. And that query actually becomes a scatter across all 480 shards. So the choice is conditional. The shard key encodes the assumption that some queries will be rare. And if that assumption turns out to be wrong later, you'll be stuck. Okay, so now Notion have sharded for the operational workload, but that handles the live product. It does not handle the second problem, which is analytics and AI. So now when Notion wanted to build features like search across your workspace or the AI Q&A that reads through every page in your workspace and answers questions about it, they needed to run massive analytical queries over block data. And they had to scan every block, embed every block, compute features over every block. And you cannot do this against your production Postgres. Or rather you can, but you'll take the product down. So analytical queries and transactional queries fundamentally conflict. One wants to scan, the other wants to index and seek, and they fight for the same resources. So Notion did what most large-scale systems eventually do. They built a separate data layer optimized for analytics. They call it their data lake. And it's built on top of Apache Hudi, which is a transactional layer over object storage that lets you do efficient incremental updates without rewriting all your data. And this is how the architecture works. The operational Postgres is the actual source of truth. So every change to Postgres, like every block created, updated, or deleted, gets captured via Postgres' logical replication and streamed into a pipeline. And that pipeline lands the changes into the data lake, where they're stored in a columnar format on objects. And from the data lake, downstream consumers can read everything. The AI features pull from there to compute embeddings, the search index reads from there to build search structures, and analytics dashboards query against it directly. So in this case, the two worlds don't conflict because they're not on the same database. The operational world is optimized for low latency lookups. The analytical world is optimized for massive scans, and each gets the right tool. And the reason Notion could build the AI Q&A feature or the cross workspace search or any other analytic product, the reason these things became possible is because they had the separation in place. So without the data lake, none of this works. The Postgres shards would just melt under analytical load. So this is the second main lesson of this video, which is production databases serve queries and analytical systems answer questions. The minute you start asking your production database to do both, you're going to be in trouble. So you either need a read replica setup, or you need a separate analytical store, or you need both of them. Okay, so now I want to cover what all of this costs. Because as senior engineers, we don't want to skip trade-offs. Even with all the brilliant things that Notion has done, they still have a lot of trade-offs. Now, the block model is actually expensive at every layer. It makes permissions expensive because every check is a tree walk, as we have covered. It makes search expensive because you can't just index a document. You have to recursively flatten a block tree first. And it makes end-to-end encryption very hard. Even if you encrypt the contents of each block, the relationships between the blocks are still visible to the backend because the backend needs to traverse those relationships to do anything useful. And true end-to-end encryption on Notion is essentially impossible without changing the model. It makes data migration hard, and when you have 200 billion rows in one logical structure, migrating to a different structure later is effectively impossible. But they're committed to this model forever. It makes onboarding new engineers slow, and there's a learning curve to understanding how everything maps to blocks, and the indirection adds cognitive overhead until you internalize it. So the block model is not free. It's a long-term bet, and the flexibility that you get from it is worth the cost that Notion is paying at every other layer. So that is the lesson. Every powerful abstraction has an ongoing tax. And when you adopt an abstraction, you're not just adopting its benefits, you're committing to paying its costs at every layer forever. So let's quickly recap. First, data model decisions outlive every other decision that you will ever make. The database is replaceable, the framework is replaceable, the cloud provider is replaceable, but the shape of your data, once you've got a billion rows, is very difficult to change. The second lesson that we got was that powerful abstractions have ongoing costs that surface forever. Now, Notion's block model is brilliant, but they're also paying a lot of cost for permissions, for search, for encryption, and many other layers. And third is that when you have two different traversal directions over the same data, model them as two different pointer systems. Fourth is your shard key encodes your access pattern. So if you pick it wrong, every query becomes problematic. And if you pick it right, most queries are trivial routes. Notion picked workspace, and in the Instagram video, we saw that they had picked user ID as the shard key. The fifth lesson we saw was to separate your operational workload from your analytical workload. And this is the kind of thinking we go deep down in my Algoroq cohort, which is 12 weeks, senior engineers only, real systems and real trade-offs. So don't forget to check out the website. Okay, so in Notion's data model, everything was a block. Okay, so this is what the timeline looked like. Started with one block. Then we had composability. We started paying permission tax because of using blocks. We had the two-pointer system where you had different for upward traversal and downward traversal. We started sharding with workspaces. We implemented data lake for analytics, and we are still on one block in 2026. And all of this is on Postgres. Now, making these deep dive videos and all these diagrams takes a lot of effort. So I want you to share this video with your friends. I want you to like this video and subscribe to this channel, obviously, and comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video.